Hi, and welcome to the Emmy Awards. I'm your host, Emi Cardinale. This is my podcast where I talk about what I've been watching and rewatching, and occasionally talk about my life. This episode is going to be a year in review of all of the stuff I loved and didn't love or watched, and just my thoughts on maybe not all the television I consumed this year, but the memorable ones. I do have notes. Before I get to that, I am gonna do a little life update, talk about my life. So if you don't care about that, sorry. I'll get to the other stuff eventually. But I'm feeling really emotional right now because I'm recording this episode in my parents' basement, and I started this podcast in February of this year, and especially because this is the last episode of 2022. And I started this podcast in February of this year, and I took 6 months off when I moved to LA and started a job, started a full-time professional newspaper designer job. And I recorded an episode last week in my parents' house, but I did it in my room because my brother was staying in the basement. And there was just something very emotional for me for some reason about being here recording this episode. My parents are selling this house. I don't know if I mentioned that in this intro because I've recorded it 3 times now. But my parents are selling this house. So this is the last time, possibly, I don't know. I'm planning to come back early next year to get all of my things in order. But I don't know if this is the last podcast I will ever record in the basement where the whole thing started, and I'm feeling very emotional about it because this podcast is still very small, and I recently transitioned into audio only, so I'm still figuring out kind of how to do the podcast thing without YouTube, because I feel like I understood YouTube a bit more, but I just don't have the time to edit video like I did when I was unemployed living in my parents' house at the beginning of this year. Audio only is the best decision for me, and I'm really enjoying it. I don't feel like the podcast is less enjoyable or it's just as fun for me as it was when I started at the beginning of the year. And it's a lot less pressure because I don't feel like I have to dress up and look cute, and it takes a lot less time for me to edit, which is very convenient for me now that I have a full-time job. I don't know. I've been feeling very nostalgic because I found out that they were selling the house a week before I came out here for Christmas, and it's just kind of overwhelming, really overwhelming, because this was my last Christmas in this house, and it really hit me when my parents left. My parents and my brother left for a trip yesterday, and it just hit me that Christmas was really over, and the holiday season in this house was really over. So I've just been very emotional about that. And I could have recorded this episode in my room. Last week was really anxious recording in my room because I felt like I was being kind of loud, and I always record these late. But I could. I didn't wake anybody up. So I could, but I wanted to do it in my parents' basement. And I will do a little general year in review at the end of this about all of that, but I don't know. I wanted to say that at the top of the show because I'm feeling very emotional. It feels very stupid to be of how far this podcast has come, because this is only my 21st episode. And again, I took 6 months off in the year, and I have 7 followers on Spotify. I'm still a very small podcast, a teeny tiny podcast, but I don't know. There's something emotional about recording this where I recorded the first one, and I wanted to say that in case I sound stupid. I don't know. So, as I said, this episode is my thoughts overarching on the television I consumed. I do have categories, and I'm going to end with shows I rewatched just so I don't so I can get the new stuff out of the way first, if that makes sense. I'm starting with reality TV. I split this into categories. So if you don't care about reality TV, maybe just keep fast forwarding until you get to a part that you care about. I don't really know. So first thing I need to talk about in terms of reality TV is obviously the Bachelor franchise, and the 3 seasons of the franchise we saw this year, 2022. So it started off with The Bachelor, obviously, Clayton as The Bachelor. And I will say, I was like, why is Clayton The Bachelor? Because we knew nothing about him. And his season was really frustrating to watch because it was frustrating to watch. The Shanae stuff, that season was such a shit show. And then the rose ceremony from hell. I actually have a podcast episode where I did a whole, I did a whole episode just on my thoughts on the finale. And I do have to say, in retrospect now, I was very harsh on Clayton. And I feel like I try very hard, even when I'm harsh to contestants, because I do criticize certain things the contestants say or do, or behaviors or choices they make. I try to always qualify it, or put like a caveat, or like I try to always present my critiques of contestants on the Bachelor franchise with the knowledge of like they are in a very highly manipulated, like toxic environment. It's very manufactured, like there's editing. Like I try to always qualify it by being like, I'm not saying this about them as people, I'm saying based off of what we saw, this is my interpretation. So I do feel like I was kind of harsh on Clayton. I remember being like, when he broke up with Gabby and Rachel together, like, I was like, why are you doing that? But like logically, he doesn't have as much free will as we might think. Like it's not a real world situation. The producers are probably like, you have to go, they're both together, break up with them together. And Clayton, I think maybe his biggest flaw was that he wasn't aware. I think a good lead is aware of the ways, and good contestants too, I feel like have to be aware of the ways that producers are trying to manipulate you so you can push back. Obviously, there's only so much you can push back, and it's like easier said than done. But I think as a lead, you have more power to be like, no. And I do think leads that say no sometimes can get villain edits, and like it's a whole thing. But I think that as a lead, you have a little bit more power to be like, no, I'm going to break up with them individually. And I just don't think maybe Clayton knew that or realized that. And so I think a lot of his like mistakes were probably just very like caused by producers. And I think that the backlash he received and like the way the producers kept like in the next season being like Clayton sucks and the narrative kept being like Clayton is the worst, I think honestly it was unnecessary. And I think that's for me when I really started being like, oh, I don't know if I like that, because there are certain contestants where I feel like even if producers like, I feel like when the producers are trying to tell me that somebody sucks so badly, it makes me be like, why do you want me to think they suck? And it makes me question like their negative behavior from before, if that makes sense. So I do feel differently about Clayton now. That season, I don't really know if I liked it. It was just, I don't know. I really loved seeing Gabby as a contestant. I loved Rachel as a contestant. I was very happy when they were announced co-bachelorettes. And although I was wary of their season because I, again, do not have faith in the Bachelor producers. So I was glad when Clayton's season was over. I didn't really think him and Susie were gonna last, but I wanted them to. There were a couple that I feel like, and I've seen this before many times, where I saw their personalities more when they were like on social media than I did on the show. So I was rooting for them and they're no longer together, but I do wish them individually the best. And that season was not the best Bachelor season I've seen in a while, because again, the drama felt very, I don't know. And the finale, everybody was like, it's the most dramatic finale ever. And again, I did a whole podcast episode on it, but I don't feel like it was that dramatic. Like, it's all stuff I've seen. It just gave me a lot of whiplash. There was a lot of back and forth. And I think a lot of it is probably just the environment and the producers and the manipulation and a lot of things beyond just like people's faults in relationships. Like, I don't think it's like Clayton's fault as like a partner, or like, I think it was just the environment. But I don't know if that made any sense. So then the Bachelorettes, with an S at the end. the Bachelorette's season was unbelievably also frustrating for me to watch, because I think they announced it, like, I genuinely feel like when they announced it, it was kind of like a last second thing. I don't think they were like, guys, what if this next season we do 2 bachelorettes? I think it was a thing where people felt so bad for Gabby and Rachel that they were like, well, we'll make them together. And they kind of just didn't know what the structure was going to be like. And there was a lot of, like, I don't know, the producers were so clearly figuring it out as they went. And I feel like they should have mapped it out of, like, when is there going to be a cutoff of, like, you can't go back and forth. And, like, there were just so many things. And the way the contestants spoke to the lead, because they had more options than just the one person, it was a very interesting way to see all the ways that the regular format of The Bachelor and Bachelorette, like, ways that when that's changed, like, how much things changed. Because it's like the way the guys spoke to the lead, that was complete, like, that, a lot of the things they said to Gabby, or people turning down Rachel, it's like, that doesn't happen that much when it's like, that's your only option to stay on the show, you know? So there were a lot of dynamics that were just different from, like, a regular season. And I think my biggest critique of the Bachelorette season was that it was rushed. We didn't get enough time to develop, like, to feel a certain way about any of the contestants and their relationships, because there were so many, and because there were 2 leads. And I was just not a fan of the 2 leads structure. I don't think it works. I wasn't a fan. I also feel like, because The Bachelor refuses to just not pit women against each other, it became very much like one of them is the good Bachelorette, Gabby, and one of them is the, like, bad Bachelorette, because people always have to have somebody to hate when they watch TV, even reality TV, and I think the 2 leads allowed people to do that in a different way, and a way I did not like. I don't know, I think Rachel would have been a wonderful contestant on Bachelor in Paradise, I think, or maybe she would have even been a more confident and, like, interesting Bachelorette by herself. But I think doing it with somebody else, as much as she's always like, I'm sure she is grateful she had Gabby, because it is probably very validating to have somebody who's literally going through similar things. I don't know, there were a lot of clear benefits and negatives of having a co-lead, I think, and I think it really hit Rachel really hard. I think she would have done so well on Bachelor in Paradise, and they should have had Gabby be the sole Bachelorette. There was no need to do 2 leads. It just, I don't know. And none of the relationships lasted, so it didn't produce higher odds or whatever. Like, it was just not a good decision. And then we get to Bachelor in Paradise. Bachelor in Paradise, I think, was really when I was like, they just are done with pretending the show is real, apparently. Because obviously The Bachelor has been a very manipulated show for a while. And that's, like, a thing that they do. I just feel like this season of Bachelor in Paradise, I don't know. Some people loved the season of Bachelor in Paradise because so many people were, like, suffering. But the thing is, we're not suffering, but there was a lot of drama. And here's the thing. I like a good amount of drama. I'm not somebody who only watches reality TV for, like, the relationships. Because logically, when I get attached to a relationship, I'm like, Emi, let's be real. It's not going to last. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but more often than not on The Bachelor, they don't. So I just try not to get attached to Bachelor relationships. I don't watch it invested in a love story. Do I hope it happens? Yeah. Like, I'm very happy when it does. But I watch it more because it's a very interesting, I don't know, the thing about The Bachelor, and I wish producers knew this, and it was, like, my biggest complaint about Bachelor in Paradise, is that the structure of the show and the fact that you're isolated from friends and family, you don't have access to TV, to any form of media, your phones, like the outside world. And in The Bachelor specifically, or The Bachelorette, you're competing for one person. It's a very already mind-fucking environment, pardon my language, where they really don't need to torture them. In people's day-to-day lives, there's drama and there's interpersonal relationships. Imagine that heightened, because you can't escape. You're all in the same place. You're, like, away from your support system, you're away from your routine. Like, there are a lot, like, it's already going to make people conflict is already going to happen. And I think I've seen people say it before about Alon Gale, but he was an executive producer of The Bachelor for a while, and now he no longer works for them. And I saw somebody say once, or heard somebody say once, that he like knew the perfect balance of like nudging situations but not pushing it too far where it felt like very clearly manufactured and manipulated. And I just think that the show is getting to a point where it's like, it's just so unbelievably like manufactured, where it makes it just frustrating to watch. The contestants don't seem like they're having a good time. There's going to be drama anyway. Not everybody's going to get along. Like, you don't need to instigate drama, because honestly, that drama is less interesting than drama that just happens naturally. Because of misunderstandings or miscommunications or people not liking each other. That stuff is so fascinating. Like, you watch old seasons of The Bachelor and it's like, or The Bachelorette, and it's like, and obviously the show's always been manufactured and like produced. I'm not saying that it's not a produced television show. But I think the producers now are getting to a point where I think they're always trying to be the most dramatic season finale, the most, like, the most tears. Like, they're always trying to up themselves in a way that just creates, like, very manufactured, produced television in a, like, way that is just not fun to watch. And honestly, it's not going to get good contestants on your show. Like, if people are watching the show, they're not going to want to, like, you're not making it an enticing. The Bachelor, and don't get me wrong, people are still going to go on the show because you can get a social media following of it, but I feel like there was, like, a golden age where, like, you would go on the show and it was hard, but, like, unless you were the villain, or something, like, you could probably get out without too bad of, like, an edit or too bad of an impact on, like, your image, and then, like, get a good amount of following. And the numbers have just gone down because network TV just isn't doing the same as streaming is. And, like, not, like, now you just go on, you get, like, tortured in a way that you maybe didn't, and you don't even really get a benefit from it because you can't really gain social media influence the same. And if you do, it's, like, rare. Like, it's a lot harder to do that now. So I don't know. I'm not even at this point I could talk about The Bachelor for hours. Bachelor in Paradise this season, I don't even remember like that many of the details because it also went on for way too long. Like, they made it go on for way too long. I can't even remember everything that happened. Like, there was too much. I don't know. I don't even remember which couples. Oh my god, no. This season of Bachelor in Paradise genuinely like gives me a headache. The Greg, Victoria, Johnny debacle, like the season, and that's another thing. Like, one of my biggest, one of my biggest complaints about the show, like everything that happened on the beach, was that a lot of it just felt too produced and manufactured with split week and stuff like that. There was also, like, looking back on the season as a whole, there was so much filler, and then they rushed through the finale. Like, that was the part that I actually wanted to know more about. And I am always somebody who's like, the finales are so rushed, and for once I was like, the finales are always drag on, and this was once where I was like, the finale could have been like 4 hours and I would have like watched every single part of it. So I just don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of the season of Bachelor in Paradise. I think that they should stick to the regular amount of episodes. They should interfere less with people. Like, just don't do split week again. Like, there are just so many things where they're trying to make it more dramatic, and it just makes it more miserable, because I don't want to watch people being miserable on TV. Like, do I want to watch conflict? Yeah, conflict is interesting, but people being miserable or people being tortured by like that's not fun for me. It's not. So I wasn't a big fan, and I don't even really remember many of the couples. Like, who else is there besides Serene and Brandon? Was there somebody else? Because I don't remember anybody else. I'm very happy for Serene and Brandon. Okay, I like them. She's a Gemini, he's a Leo. I love that. I would love to date a Leo. So, if you're like Brandon vibe Leo, I think he probably has a water moon or water rising, because he is so emotional. I would love to see his birth chart. Maybe Bachelor Horoscopes has it. But anyways, I've gone on too long talking about The Bachelor. I have so many other shows I need to talk about. Okay, I'm going to continue the reality TV thing. So, a few Netflix reality shows that I watched. One was obviously the most recent season of Love is Blind. I have so many thoughts on that. I really liked it. I think season 1 was really good, and then season 2 was just not as interesting for me. There weren't that many couples where I felt invested in them. And this season, I liked it a little bit more than last season because there was at least one couple, Alexa and Brennan, I think is his name. When I was watching it, I was like, I feel like they're good together and I see them lasting, where I didn't feel that way about any couple last season. And I just think Love is Blind is like, it's obviously very early in the way it works, but I think Game of Roses, a Bachelor podcast I really love, they've been reviewing it episode, like 2 episodes at a time. They've been like rewatching season 3, and I think they said something that was really like smart, and I agree with that. I feel like they're still figuring out their format in the way that like The Bachelor has already like honed out, and like the structure is very set in like when you do overnight dates and when you meet the family, where like Love is Blind is like on season 3, like it's so early, and I think that there are like little tweaks that they could make to make the pace be better, because I do think that is one thing about The Bachelor, that it has really good pacing where it gets more interesting and more high stakes at the end, where I think Love is Blind has a little bit of a dip, and I think they need to figure that out. But I liked this season. I'm excited for the next season. I know that they've been like that they film, I don't know if they've already filmed season 4, but I know they filmed seasons 2 and 3 like really close to each other, so I don't know. One of my biggest critiques of Love is Blind is when they do the reunions, like they release them like a half out, like and not the like recap at the end. I mean, when they do like after the altar, those like they always release them like 6 months after they filmed. And I know the last one, like the one they released for season 2, was like super not updated. Like half the couples that were like on the rocks or like still together, like 2 of them were divorced. Maybe instead of focusing on like recording seasons back to back and editing them, like I don't know. I feel like Netflix should like, I don't know, have one season bookended before they start another one, because I think it's frustrating as a viewer. But that's my biggest critique on Love is Blind. Another Netflix show I watched, actually also hosted by Nick and Vanessa Lachey, was The Ultimatum. I was not a big fan. I wouldn't recommend it. It wasn't the most interesting show for me to watch personally. I mean, it was like fine, but I just didn't love it. Basically, it's about all these couples that are together and one person is like given the ultimatum, so they like have to switch partners with somebody else for like a week, and then they go back and they live with like their original partner, and then at the end they want to decide if they do want to get married or they want to like break up or something. It's like the ultimatum, marry and move on. I don't really know. I feel like there are shows that probably do things like, I feel like Temptation Island obviously is not the same thing because you don't like pick another partner and switch, but I think Temptation Island is kind of it I've never seen it, but from my understanding it has like the same premise of like people who are at an impasse, like you separate and you explore their connections, and then at the end you decide if you want to continue with the person you're with. And I feel like Temptation Island's been around longer. They probably perfected the format a bit more, and I didn't love The Ultimatum. I wouldn't really recommend it. If you liked it, good for you. Okay. Next reality TV show that I watched this year was Big Brother 24, season 24, and I loved it. It aired over the summer. I am not a live feeder because I don't have Paramount Plus. I did log on to my sister's Paramount Plus and watch some feeds on occasion, but I don't own Paramount Plus on my own, so I did not watch live feeds, but I do keep up with I follow Big Brother updates on Twitter, and I do try to follow along what's happening on feeds, even if I'm not watching it. Like, I don't just take what's happening at the edit. But I really liked it this season. I know some people have said it was a boring season. That's really just one former contestant who is bitter, who said it was a boring season because he didn't make it that long. But I actually think it was a really interesting season. The contestants were really interesting. The power dynamic shifted. It wasn't like a steamroll. Like there was a big alliance, and then like they got blindsided by another big alliance. Like all the outsiders in the house were like, they called themselves the leftovers. Like they teamed up. Like they flipped the house. Like, things became interesting. Like, the target. Like, I feel like it was a very fascinating season, and the person I wanted to win won, so I would really recommend watching it. I would also recommend watching, I don't remember what the name of the creator is called, but there's a video on YouTube called How Taylor Hale Won Big Brother 24. I would recommend watching that video because he brings up things that happened on the feeds that casual viewers wouldn't know, and there are even some, like, details that I feel like I knew, but I didn't know everything, and it really gave me clarity on, not clarity, but like, I don't know, clarity sounded dramatic, but it really, I wanted her to win, and I felt like she deserved to win after everything she had endured. And I think for me, one of the biggest reasons that I was always like, Taylor deserves the win is because of her jury management. Like, there were people who hated her at the beginning of the show, like, wanted her out, that were like cheering for her and rooting her on by the time she sat in those final 2 chairs. That, and like, on some level, that's testament to just being a good person and having people like, you know, maybe that's not like a strategy or a social game, like, or like a game aspect, but I think it's really important, and it's a really, like, jury management is something that I feel like a lot of people just forget when they get to the end, and it's just like, they're so focused on winning competitions or like strategically outwinning people that they forget that, and I just think her jury management was like phenomenal, and I think we've seen so many people in recent years like lose because they had they had shitty jury management, and I think it really can't be underestimated or undervalued enough how important that is, because this YouTuber said, and I can't remember his name, I'm so sorry, he was like, at the end of the day, Big Brother is a game you win by winning over jury's votes. Like, that's how you win, the jury. And it's true. Like, the fact that there are people that, like, hated her, wanted her out at the beginning of the season, not only, like, came around and didn't hate her, but wanted her to win and voted for her to win, and were so excited to see her win. Like, to me, that is just, how can you say she's not a good player? That, to me, is a good player. Sorry, it just is. Jury management is really important. I think it's something that's overlooked. And I don't even think necessarily, and the fact that she was, like, treated horrendously and she was bullied and still managed to just, like, be good enough, like, be good enough and kind enough to people and compassionate enough to people and, like, rise above any, like, to the point where people then liked her and, like, loved her and were rooting for her. That, to me, is just, like, it's a wonderful, like, arc. It's a wonderful story. She made history. She was great at the game. I love her as a person, and I'm glad she won. Yeah. But it was a really interesting season beyond that. There was a competitor who, his name's Michael. He, like, broke records. He was really good comp beast. He kind of broke the mold of what I think a lot of people consider, like, a lot of the times in the game, people who are, like, strong, muscular, those are, like, people who are, like, interpreted as threats and, like, competition beasts. And he, like, didn't fit that stereotypical mold, but he still was, like, a comp beast and, like, broke a record. I recommend the season. If you haven't watched Big Brother before, I still recommend it. I also recommend last season of Big Brother 23. The last reality show that I have on my list is this year, binged all of Keeping Up with the Kardashians from the first season to the last season. And then I watched their new show. But I had started watching their new show, like, when it was airing anyway. I think before I started Keeping Up with the Kardashians, I can't remember. I really liked Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Honestly, I feel like the earlier seasons are good. The more rich and out of touch they get, the more not fun the show is to watch. And don't get me wrong, they're always, like, they're rich from the beginning and, like, you know, but I think as they become more and more famous, and I don't know if this is the only reason that I don't love their new series, but it's just like the Kardashians, I feel like when I watch them, I'm like, they're so out of touch and so, like, on a, like, level that I don't understand, that I just, like, it's frustrating and it's annoying to watch. And I'm not a fan of the Kardashians. I've never been a fan of the Kardashians, but I wanted some kind of reality TV to watch in The Bachelor off season, because there was a larger time between The Bachelor ending and The Bachelorette starting, probably because it was twice as long. So I was like, I'll watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians. And I enjoyed it. But again, as it got to the later seasons, it wasn't as interesting to me. Would I recommend Keeping Up with the Kardashians? I don't really know. Probably not. I really wouldn't recommend their new show. I don't find it interesting. The one thing I will say about the Kardashians is that I feel like they are so out of touch, and maybe their PR people are just so rich that they're so out of touch that I feel like they don't understand. Like, they will respond to criticism, and I'm like, you are missing the point of why people are upset with you. So, like, I don't know. Like, I needed to mention that because I'm not a liar, okay? Am I ashamed? A little bit. But I consider myself a pop culture icon. I like to be in the know of things, and I feel like Keeping Up with the Kardashians on some level is somewhat relevant, you know? They're relevant to media, so I wanted to know. And there are some really funny sounds from the earlier seasons, you know? This is the land of your people. This is not the land. This is Glendale. That was iconic. Every time I'm in Glendale now that I live in LA, I'm like, this is the land of your people. So, I don't know. Just my thoughts. I put Shark Tank on the list with reality shows because I don't really know what it would be categorized as. But I love Shark Tank as per usual. I can't think of anything that I watched like from like this year, like any new products that I've started. I feel like granola butter was this year. I feel like, I don't know. I love Shark Tank. Been watching it forever. They did like for the premiere of their new season, they did like a live episode. I don't think they should do that again. It didn't work. It was interesting to watch, but I just think they should stick to the like pre-recorded stuff. Some people are better live and some people are better pre-recorded. Shark Tank, I think, just works better when there's more time to get all the details and then the editors can condense it to the stuff that is just the most relevant to viewers, you know? So next category I have are like sitcoms or like 30-minute shows. Abbott Elementary I started this year. I hadn't seen the first season, but when the second season came out, I was like, let me watch it. It's great. I love it. I watch it every week now. I cannot say enough like wonderful things about Abbott Elementary. I was kind of hesitant because I was like, do I really want to watch a show about like elementary school? But like the kids are such minor, like it's really about the teacher, which I knew, but like I don't know. I think it's really well done. I don't think that child actors or children should be like main characters in things, like 90% of the time. So I don't know. I think it's really well done, and all the actors. It's such a funny show, and it's a nice 30-minute watch once a week. Big fan. Another show that I also started is Home Economics. Also a big fan. I don't love it as much as Abbott Elementary, but it's a great show. It's fun seeing the guy from that 70s show. These are just kind of shows that are like, there are some shows, like, I still watch Law & Order SVU, even though ACAB and all of that, just because I'm too, like, attached to Law & Order SVU. And there are just some weeks where I'm like, I can't watch, sometimes I'm just not in the mood. It's too heavy. Abbott Elementary and Home Economics are shows that I'm always like, I can watch. No matter how I'm feeling, I can watch them, and they will make me smile. So, big fan. And then the third and last one I have on the list of like sitcom shorter shows, because those aren't really the type of shows I tend to watch, is Single Drunk Female. I loved this show. I think it's funny, it's smart, the characters are really interesting, and I think it talks about alcoholism and addiction in a really interesting way and nuanced way. I don't know. I'm not an alcoholic, so obviously speaking from an outsider's perspective, but I have dealt with like group therapies and like being like in a psych ward. Not that she was in a psych ward, but she went to like rehab for like, anyways, I don't know that exact experience, but I do understand like mental health issues surfacing in unhealthy coping mechanisms. I have experience in that. Maybe for me it's not alcohol, but I have other, I just thought it was really well done, and I thought it was funny and smart and enjoyable, and I liked it. I want to rewatch it. I really enjoyed it. I don't have much intelligent commentary on it, but I do recommend it. I don't know if it got picked up for a second season, but I hope it did, because big fan. Miscellaneous / shows that were primarily on streaming. Inventing Anna. I watched the show twice, once with my parents, and I died at the end when the friend Rachel was like, said she went to Kenyon College. Because she actually did, like, the person it's based off of did go to Kenyon, and she wrote a book about, like, her experience with Anna Delvey, and I didn't know any of this. which was disappointing to me because I like to consider myself, like, I like to know who went to Kenya, and I try to research alum, you know, I like to know that stuff. I had no idea. I liked the show. I don't think I'd rewatch it again. Like, I watched it back because I like watching things I've already seen, but watching my parents' reactions to it the first time, it was an interesting show. It was fun. I like that it was one of those shows where it's like, we're not going to get a second season. And that's nice. I don't think every show needs a second season. Like, it was a fun show. Some people said that it, like, glamorized, like, her life as a scam artist, and I never felt that way. I don't know. I know the real person, Kenyan alum, Rachel, who the character is based off of, was really upset about the show. Like, I know she was upset about it, but I just don't really feel like she came across in a negative light. Especially, like, not more than Anna. Like, Anna was, like, a scam artist. Like, to me, if you came away from that show being like, oh my god, Anna Delvey is such an icon, like a girl boss, you know, I feel like you missed the point. Like, to me, it was like, people care so much about wealth and status that they, like, scam and screw people over. Like, for me, it was never glorifying her. I never throughout it was like, I like Anna. I was like, she's kind of a sociopath. Like, I don't want to diagnose her. I don't know anything about her, but it's like, I feel like the overarching message of the show is not like, this is somebody you should emulate or aspire to. It was like, this girl clearly is messed up in some level, that she is so desperate for this. I don't know. To me, she came across as a deeply unhappy, something else was going on kind of person. Like, I don't really see it glamorizing her in any way. So, The Summer I Turned Pretty. I haven't read the book, but I really like the series. I don't know where I fall in the teams, the love triangle. I don't think I've ever watched or read something where where the character is in a love triangle with two brothers, and I have to say I'm not a fan. It makes me kind of uncomfortable. Like, I'm not a fan of the two brothers. I like the show. I'm not saying I wasn't a fan of the show or the plot. I enjoyed it a lot. It was a fun show. I'm excited for season 2. I liked it. I would recommend it. Euphoria, I hadn't watched the whole season. I hadn't watched season 1 all the way through. But I had watched somebody watching it on YouTube. It sounds so, like, stupid, but sometimes when I don't want to watch something, or I'm, like, unsure if I'm gonna like it, I watch somebody reacting to it and, like, making commentary on it on YouTube before I, like, watch it or decide that I want to watch it. I like doing that also with shows I've already seen and hearing people's commentary. But for Euphoria, there's a YouTuber I really like, Your Internet Mom Ash. She like watched Euphoria episode to episode, season 1. So I had already seen that, so I knew the general plot, but I had never watched Euphoria all the way through uncensored, because obviously she's watching it on YouTube, so, like, a lot of stuff is censored. And I liked season 1, and then I watched season 2 every week, and I really liked season 2. I liked that Lexi got more of a spotlight because she was my favorite character. I loved the play. That plot, I think, was one of my favorite plots. I'm excited for season 3. Yeah, I like the show. Is it my favorite show in the entire world? No. That show, I don't know if I saw this in a tweet once or somebody said it to me, but, like, when Euphoria is good, it's so good. But when Euphoria is, like, not that good, it just falls flat and it's, like, fine. And I feel that way because there's some episodes and moments that are just so good and so powerful and captivating and enjoyable. And then there are some episodes where I come away and I'm like, damn, nothing happened. But I don't know. I like Euphoria. Okay? Not hating on Euphoria. And then Sex Lives of College Girls, obviously that's like top 10 favorite shows that I consumed this year. I mean, obviously season 1 was last year. I already did a very long recap review of Sex Lives of College Girls season 2. So if you happen upon this and you haven't listened to that, but you want to hear it, please check it out. I spent a long time on it. It was episode 19, I believe. And then White Lotus season 2, I've also talked about it a little bit, not as in depth, but White Lotus season 2, iconic. I was talking to my mom about it yesterday, and she was, like, watching it, and my dad, like, he hadn't seen, like, all the episodes up to where she was, and he was like, that's okay, like, just let me know what happens so I know the general gist. And she was like, when I was thinking about it, I was like, man, nothing good happens in this show. She was like, every single character, like, all this shit is happening to them. And I was like, well, they're in Sicily. And my mom was like, yeah, they're in Sicily. It's, like, the one good thing that's happening to people. You know who really lucked out? The Mia and Lucia. They were happy at the end. They are the true winners of the show, as they should have been. As they should have been. But yeah, that was a great. I'm excited to see what the next season is going to be. But I just have such a like soft spot in my heart for Italy. So I just don't know. Like, I love Italy, probably because I'm part Italian. So it's not going to be the same. No, I'm excited. I'm not going to count season 3 out. We'll see what happens. It wasn't this year. It was at the end of last year. I watched Succession, all 3 seasons. I'm excited for the next season. I don't know when that's coming out, but right after season 3 ended, I watched the whole thing because everybody was like, Succession's the best show. It is really good. And then another show that was like I watched on streaming was Wednesday. I think I've also talked about this before. I really loved it. Jenna Ortega is just such a good actress. Everything I see her in, like, I feel like I'm watching the character. I don't feel like I'm watching Jenna Ortega. And that is exactly, for me, what I like to watch when I'm watching an actor. And I never feel like if I'm watching her in one show, I don't feel like, oh, I'm watching Jenna Ortega or I'm watching another character she played, like, again. Like, she's really, really good. I love her. And I really want to rewatch it. Like, Wednesday is not the type of show I normally watch. Like, I'm not typically into, like, supernatural type stuff or, like, with powers or, like, I've never really watched The Addams Family. It's not typically the kind of thing that's up my alley, like Tim Burton, like, that kind of stuff. It's really not. But I really like Jenna Ortega, and I was intrigued, and I watched it, and I loved it. And it's actually probably, like, one of my favorite shows that I watched this year, which if you had told me that before I went into it, I would have been kind of, like, surprised. But she's just so good, and the characters are so good, and I enjoyed it. I'm excited. I don't know if it's been picked up for a season 2, but I imagine it will be because it broke records. So the next category I have on here are reboots and spinoffs. So Gossip Girl, the new one, I already talked about in my last episode. I have a lot of mixed feelings about it. Georgina Sparks is back, and I'm very excited because Georgina Sparks like knows how to make a show good. I'm so excited. I hope she's like I'm excited. I feel like Georgina Sparks is gonna... I said in my last episode that I feel like Gossip Girl hasn't been like a looming, scary presence on the kids. Most of the Gossip Girl storylines are about the teachers. They're not about like the students being scared of like this person like finding... Like, it's just not as interesting to me. It's not. Even like in the last episode, there was like... Zoya, in the episode before, she had gone to Philadelphia and she had said her name was Monet DeHaan and she had sex with somebody. And we find out in this episode that there's a sex tape. And even that, it was like some anonymous person like slid into Monet's DMs. It would have been more interesting if like Gossip Girl, and this I feel like is how this plot line would have worked in the original show, where it's like Gossip Girl somehow, unbeknownst to us, like we have no idea, got a hold of this sex tape. Like that would be more I think because we know who Gossip Girl is, like it's not, I don't know if that was the right choice. I don't know if that was the right choice. I feel like it's made Gossip Girl not as a threat, like not as threatening of a presence. I do like that the cast is more like diverse and like I do appreciate the storylines that aren't just about the same kind of people. There are just some things that I feel like it's not doing yet, but I feel like it can. I feel like it can get there. I really do. I'm not somebody who wants to get canceled or thinks it's a horrible show. How I Met Your Father. I loved this show. It was really silly and it was fun, and I think, I don't know, I really like that we don't see the kid from the beginning. We see future Sophie talking to a screen, but we don't see the kid, so we don't know. We can't, be like, we know that somebody we've already met is the father, because the first episode, instead of it being like the whole thing is leading up to the mother, of like when he meets the mother, the whole, like the first episode, the pilot episode, we find out that was the night that she met the father. But we don't know, obviously, if the father is who she ends up with. We can't see the kid, so we can't guess because there's not just white people. So it would give something away. Like there's a lot of factors that, and also because you can't see the kid, like they don't have to like pigeonhole themselves into like, or like commit to like an ending like 10 years before the show is like written out. Because I think there's some shows where having a clear ending in mind works, but I think sometimes when you're writing, if you're writing characters over 9 seasons, but the ending you originally wanted 9 years ago doesn't fit the characters now, you have to undo all this character development that you did, and I think that was one of the most frustrating parts of How I Met Your Mother, and I think that's a good thing that How I Met Your Father did, that it didn't pigeonhole itself into an ending from the beginning, because we don't see the kid, so they don't even have to like have the father picked out, I guess, if they don't want to yet. They don't have to have like the age of the actor isn't going to change, so they don't have to film all that stuff years before. Like, I don't know. I think there are a lot of things that How I Met Your Mother maybe like should have done a little bit differently that How I Met Your Father does. I like the characters. Hilary Duff is killing it. Like, I enjoyed the show. I'm excited. I think it got a season 2. I'm excited for season 2. I don't know who I think the father is. I think the twist is going to be that, because the big twist at the end of How I Met Your Mother was that the whole point was that he wanted to end up with Robin. I think How I Met Your Father is going to be somewhat similar in that the father is not necessarily going to be the person she ends up with. The last show I have on my list for reboots and spinoffs is Pretty Little Liars Original Sin. I don't know if I've talked about this before, like the show, but I loved it. I loved Pretty Little Liars Original Sin. I watched all the episodes probably at this point like 3 times. And I never do that with shows that like are like freshly out. But literally, like, the episode, like, after the first episode came out, I, like, rewatched it ahead of the second episode, and I did that, like, going forward. Like, I don't typically do that, but I was so interested in, like, picking up theories, and, like I was very invested. I like the characters. I like the way that it feels like it's its own show. There's not, there were little hints when they went to Rosewood, but besides that, it's, like, its own show. The characters are their own. I liked the element of the moms and the flashbacks and like the way, I don't know, it's like that Jamie Lee Curtis thing where she's like, it's about generational trauma. I like that it's on streaming so the characters can curse. I think Pretty Little Liars started off just being about like threatening text, and then slowly people died and it got like a lot more gory. Pretty Little Liars Original Sin, like I feel like from the beginning is like very intense and a lot more horror-esque in a way I think Pretty Little Liars the original like built up to, and in a way that when I was watching it as a teenager honestly kind of frustrated me. I didn't love as much because I was like, I feel like if the vibe of the show kept going from what season 1 was, it would have been more enjoyable to me. Now as an adult who has rewatched all of Pretty Little Liars, I appreciate all of it, like genuinely. Like now I'm not like as, I don't know, but for a while it felt like when I was watching it, I was like, I don't feel like it knows what it wants to be. Like suddenly it's a lot scarier than the show I committed to. And I originally stopped watching Pretty Little Liars when I was younger. But I'll get to that when I talk about shows I rewatched this year. But yeah, I would really recommend Pretty Little Liars Original Sin. You don't even have to have watched the original. I mean, you don't really have to watch the original for Gossip Girl or How I Met Your Father either. Excited for the next season, hopefully. Final category is shows I rewatched this year. At the top of the list is Pretty Little Liars. I really started my year off with a rewatch because of Mike's Mike. My sister sent me his deep dive into season, like into the beginning, and I watched it, and then I was like, honestly, before the other 2 parts come out, I kind of want to rewatch the whole thing. And as I said earlier, I never finished Pretty Little Liars when I was watching it when I was younger. I watched like up until they revealed that Cece Drake was like the big A or whatever they were calling the Radico, whatever they were calling her, because that was the first time that they had a trans character on the show, and they made her the villain. And when I was younger, that just didn't sit right with me. And I had also got into a point where I was just like, I'm so done with this show. Like, I was just fatigued of the show. And that for me was kind of like, I don't think I'm going to keep watching. And I knew that they were going to do a time jump pretty soon after. So I was just like, at that point, I was like, I don't know if I want to keep watching. But I enjoyed rewatching the whole thing. It's a really fun show. Like, I really recommend you watch it. I really recommend you rewatch it if you watched it when you were younger, but you don't fully remember, because it's like so fascinating to watch. I don't know, the Arya and Ezra relationship, like the way I viewed it as a kid and like the way I view it now as a 23-year-old adult. Because when I watched the show for the first time, I was closer to Arya's age in the relationship. And now I'm like the age Ezra would have, like, is at the beginning. And I just, don't get me wrong. Like, no, actually, when I was going to say don't get me wrong, I always thought it was gross. But I didn't. I was like, I always knew it was, like, wrong. And, like, as I got older, I feel like once I got to, like, probably maybe 16, 17, like, I did understand that it was wrong. But I was like, they're characters on a TV show, so it's not a big deal. But I think now I'm like, it is a big deal because you shouldn't depict that to 16-year-olds who, like, are watching it being like, it's not a big deal. Or, like, that's sexy and that's attractive. And it's just so interesting to me now as and I always, like, liked my teachers and felt like I connected to my teachers and viewed my teachers like as my friends. I always like respected that there was a boundary and like a level of authority they had over me, obviously. Like I wasn't treating my teachers like we were peers because we weren't, but I always had a connection to teachers. So I don't know, on some level, I feel like when I was younger, I shipped them and I liked them together. And I was like, well, the age difference isn't as bad. I feel like when it really shifted for me, when I was watching the show originally, was when we found out that he knew the whole time how old she was and that he was writing a book on her missing friend whom he had known before. To me, I feel like that was the turning point where I was like, Ezra's a creep. But before that, I was like, well, they met. He didn't know. You know, I was more along that line. And now as a 23-year-old, like watching the entire thing was so frustrating to me. I was like, what the fuck is going on in the town of Rosewood? And not just that relationship. Like there's so many relationships where it's like, these are grown men. As a 23-year-old, I can't even imagine like dating an 18-year-old. Like how would you... God, if I met somebody in high school right now, that's like a child to me. I don't even know. And one of the most like frustrating things rewatching it was that the conversation was always about how she is your student and you're her teacher. It was never like she's a minor. Like literally they were like when her parents found out, they were like, with your student? I'm like, what about the fact that he's 23 dating a 16-year-old girl? Like, he quits his job and suddenly it's like, well, now we can date because I'm not your teacher. It's like, no, you are still a felon. Go to jail. I don't know. It's just baffling to watch. There's like one character, his like ex, Jackie, I think is her name, who is like, she's a minor. And I'm like, Jackie, I love you, girl. And I hated her when I first watched it. Anyways, but it's a really fun show. I like all the reference to twins. As a twin. I really recommend, I recommend watching it. If you don't want to watch that, I do recommend watching Mike's deep dive on it, all 3 parts. It's so good. It's so good. I still rewatch it sometimes. He's doing one on Gossip Girl and I'm really excited. Another show I rewatched was The OC because I moved to California and I didn't move to Orange County, but I was like, I love The OC. I really do. I don't have anything intelligent to say. I recommend it. If you've never seen The OC, but you like shows like Gossip Girl, I do really recommend it because it's that same like vibe of like rich people, but they're in Orange County. The whole show starts with this kid, Ryan, like stealing a car with his older brother, and his public defense attorney is Sandy Cohen, legend, icon, king. And he takes him home to his house in Orange County. And he's like, I didn't think your kind of lawyer made that much money. He's like, I don't, my wife does. His wife's loaded. So, yeah, and it's about Sandy Cohen's family with his son, Seth Cohen, who becomes like really close friends with Ryan, and eventually they become legal guardians of Ryan, and it's kind of like really interesting to watch his dynamic in this town and the way Seth grows and the way Ryan, like the characters are great, the story's great, it's the equal amounts like funny with like drama and like intrigue and like tension. I recommend the OC like 100%. You should watch it. Gilmore Girls, I'm perpetually rewatching Gilmore Girls. Right now I'm on season 2. I like literally watch like the whole series all at once. My sister is more like the kind of person where she'll rewatch specific episodes. I like to watch, like I need to start from like season 1 and go all the way to the end when I'm rewatching. And then the last show I have on my list before I wrap up this episode is a show called Sweet Vicious. I wrote an article about it when I was in college. It came out in 2016. If you watched the movie Do Revenge, or you've seen the movie Someone Great, the director of both of those movies created Sweet Vicious. It's a really great show. Honestly, Do Revenge is kind of Sweet Vicious-esque. In the Sweet Vicious is about these two girls who are like vigilantes on their college campus. And it's so good. The writing's really good. It only had one season because it was canceled on MTV, but my sister introduced it to me and I love the show. And if you can watch it, I recommend it. I have it purchased on iTunes because I don't think it's on streaming anywhere, but if it is, please correct me. But I really recommend it. I really do. Jen Caden Robinson is a legend, an icon, a queen. And Taylor Swift wrote vigilante shit about Jules and Ophelia. So that is my thoughts. Lots of rambles, lots of tangents on the shows I watched in 2022. I'm excited to see what new shows I will discover in 2023, what new shows will come out in 2023, seasons of shows I already watched that will come out, and I'm excited to talk about it now that I have honed in on a focus for this podcast. I started this podcast when I didn't really have anything to do in my parents' house when I was unemployed at the beginning of this year, and it gave me purpose and it gave me motivation in a time when I didn't have any. It gave me a creative outlet. It gave me a place to talk about things that I was thinking and feeling. This podcast, despite the fact that it's still very small and not that many people listen, and I'm really just doing it for fun and because I care about it deeply, really, it brought me so much in 2022. And I'm excited to keep growing it. I care so much about this podcast, and I'm going to keep making it and keep talking into a microphone once a week and editing it, even if nobody listens, because I find so much joy in this, and I could talk for hours. I'm excited to talk about TV going forward. And I hope you listen, and I hope if you've heard one episode or all of them and you like it, that you'll consider following me wherever you listen to podcasts. Turn notifications on so you get notified when I release episodes. This one might be out a little bit later than normal. I typically release episodes at on Fridays at noon Pacific, so 3 p.m. Eastern. Follow my other social media if you want updates or glimpses into my life, if you find me interesting. If you have any comments, critiques, feedback, I appreciate all of it. And I think that this podcast will hopefully just keep getting better. Hopefully new podcast like logo and art and all of that in 2023. I have some fun ideas that I want to do because I don't love the one I have right now. I just kind of pieced it together. And yeah, have a very nice new year. Thank you so much for listening. And here is to a better year. 2022 is crazy. I'm excited for 2023. 3 is my favorite number. So I will see you next year. Bye, guys.